Hello, in this video we will be considering what are the properties of ionic compounds. If you want to know about the properties of a bionic woman, I can't help much. But ionic compounds, yeah, we can do this. So you should remember that ionic compounds contain metals bonded to non-metals. The metals have given away their electrons, the outer electrons, to non-metals to become positive ions. The non-metals become negative ions. They're attracted to one another and held together with millions of ions, all together forming these big lattices. And we can see that in the structures of salts. Now, if you want to know about the properties of ionic compounds, the best place to start is to think about melting point. So take this little picture of an ionic lattice here, and just think how many ionic bonds are present in this structure. We'll have a look. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And obviously in a real ionic lattice there are many more ions than this. So we have lots and lots of ionic bonds. They're very strong and therefore lots of energy is required to break those bonds. Now when we melt an ionic lattice, something like this would happen. All the ions would move apart and go from being a solid to a liquid, and for that to happen we have to break the bonds. So the most important property to be able to describe of an ionic lattice is that it has a high melting point and boiling point. And the reason for this is fairly straightforward, but we need to remember to say four main things. Ionic compounds have a giant structure. Remember to use that word giant, which contains lots of ionic bonds. Ionic bonds are very strong, and because there are so many ionic bonds and because they're so strong, the energy required to break them all is very high, and that means that they have high melting points and obviously boiling points as well. In terms of other properties that we need to know for ionic compounds, well, it's helpful if we remember that sodium chloride salt is a good example of an ionic compound. And one thing we know about salt is that we find lots of it in the sea because it's soluble, and lots of ionic compounds will dissolve in water, but certainly not all, but it is a common property. When ionic compounds do dissolve, like this, they can conduct electricity because the charged particles are free to move. In the same way, ionic compounds can conduct electricity if we melt them, but they won't conduct electricity as a solid. So that's the properties of giant ionic compounds. Why not quickly make a flashcard to remind yourself of what the properties are, and then perhaps have a look at covalent or metallic structures. Well done.